Welcome to Casual Friday. Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is my weekly Casual Friday podcast. This week I have a number of tidbits. I want to answer some questions and comments that have come up around my various social media feeds. And then I'll give a short update to my 1890s sweater that's in progress. So let's get started. So first I have a few sort of channel housekeeping things that I want to talk about. Normally at the beginning of every video, before I even start the tidbits, I will say something like, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are chapter links in the video timeline. I've been saying that for a couple of months. For the 2.5 years prior to that, what I used to say was, if you'd like to jump to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the video description, and there still are. One of the problems with those direct links was that they only worked if you had a desktop computer. If you were on a mobile device or an iPad, something like that, the timestamps were there that told you where in the video each section started, but you couldn't click on it or tap on it. A couple of months ago, YouTube had rolled out a new feature where if you had those timestamp links down in your video description, they would actually appear in the video timeline. And they would have chapter names, whatever you called that section of the video before the timestamp, that would be what was called the chapter title. And you could see these little vertical lines along the timeline that showed you where the different links were. And I've been talking about these for the past couple of months. Somebody asked me this week about where are these links that I'm talking about. She's like, maybe they're obvious, but I'm just not understanding them. And she mentioned that she uses an iPad. So I wanted to show you guys what I'm talking about when I'm talking about chapter links and how you can jump to a particular section. I'm going to show you some video where I'm showing you how to do this. So when a video is playing and you're just sitting there watching it, the whole video playback screen area is just completely filled with the video. If you are on a desktop device and you move your mouse around a little bit, what you'll see at the bottom of the playback screen is a timeline, and there'll be a red dot showing you where you are in the video. And that's where you can see those chapter links. And you can kind of preview where you are. You just mouse along that timeline and you'll see what the name of the chapter is, where the next one starts, and you can go from place to place and you can kind of get a little visual about what's going on in that part of the video as it's happening. If you're on a mobile device, if you're on a phone or you're on a tablet, in order to see that, you have to just tap the screen so that it would allow you to pause the video or do something like that. But if you tap on the video playback area, that's when you will see the timeline, and that's how you can move along the timeline from one place to another if you want. There's another place where you will see links, and when I talk about video links, a lot of times I'll say, oh, I did a video on this a couple of weeks ago, I'll put a link up here. Now, if you're on a desktop device, when I do that, there's what is called a video card, and that I insert after I've uploaded the video to YouTube that says, put a link to this specific video at this location in this video I'm about to publish. If you're on a desktop machine, you'll see the name of that video come across the top of the screen, and it'll stay there for a few seconds and then it will disappear. When you mouse over that video screen or tap on it if you're on a mobile device and you are able to see that video timeline, the other thing that you will see is at the top of the screen, there's a little lowercase I in a circle. It's like that international symbol for information. At any time in the video, regardless of whether I am talking about, I'll put a link up above, you can tap on your screen or mouse over and you'll see that I button, and you can click on that I button and you will see a drop-down list of any video I talk about that I'm linking to, any of my videos that I'm linking to, and when I'm pointing to the top. So regardless of where you are in the video, you can get at those. Then at the end of the video, in the last 20 seconds of the video, there's what's called an end screen. And that's usually where you will see two different video thumbnails next to me. Sometimes I actually refer to them, and other times they're just sitting there. And in those little thumbnails, I can either put a link to another one of my videos, or I can put a link to a playlist. And so in Casual Friday videos, I always put a link to the Casual Friday playlist. So if you wanted to look at all the Casual Friday videos, you could just click on that playlist and you could skim down and see the entire list of all of the Casual Friday videos. And the other video can be something that I specifically say, put a link to a very specific video there, or I can just tell YouTube, put my latest video in there, or I can say, put in the video that would be best suited for this particular viewer, a video of mine. So sometimes I deliberately plan exactly what video are going in there, and other times I'll let YouTube decide what it's going to serve to you. But those are the places where I am linking or talking about links within my video or outside my video that are to other videos of mine. In the video description, below the playback screen, there's you usually be able to see the first sentence or so, whatever the video description is, and then it will say show more. If you click on the show more, that's when you see I can put in tons of information about things that might be of interest to you. And that's where I'm going to put external links. Like if I'm talking about a website, or if I'm talking about a book or a tool or something, I might put a link to Amazon, for example, next to the link for that. Or if it's another video from someplace else, I'll put a link to it there. So that's where all of the links are in the video that I'm talking about. So if you are wondering where these things are, just tap your screen and see what pops up and explore all of the things on the video. That's also where you'll see a little gear. If you tap on the screen or mouse over, you'll see along that bottom of the video playback screen, you'll see what looks like a gear. Kind of almost like a flower, but it's a gear. And that's where you have various settings for YouTube. So if you think I'm a super slow talker and you want to hear what I'm saying, but hear it faster, you can change the playback speed. If you want closed captions, some people need closed captions. That's where you can say turn closed captions on. If you need to see the closed captions translated into your own language, you can do something about auto-translate into your language. Now, those closed captions are generated by the YouTube artificial intelligence thing. So it's trying to use speech recognition to understand what I'm saying. And so if you're watching even in English, it may not match up exactly to what I'm saying. They're trying to guess what I'm saying. And if you are trying to watch it in another language, the translation may not be great. They don't have people doing that. I don't hire anybody to do that. These are automatic. But that's where you can get those types of tools if you need to speed something up or slow something down. So those are all tools that are available to you in YouTube that will allow you to access things that I'm talking about. So one other thing that is in that video description at the very bottom are links to my social media accounts. But most important is the link to the Rocks group. And that is really where I have my online community. So lots of times people have questions about a project that they're working on and they need help with. And I am always happy to do that, but I want to do it within the Rocks group. I don't help people with projects individually one-on-one through direct message. I don't do it through Facebook Messenger. I don't do it through Ravelry direct message. If you have a question that's not about a project and you just want to ask me actually something like it's a more personal question about whatever, like, would you come speak to our knitters group by Zoom or something like that? that's totally appropriate for direct message. But if you're having problems with the sweater that you're knitting for your daughter and you don't understand the particular directions, you do it in the Rocks group. So when you go there, you'll see the discussion thread. You'll click on where it says start a topic, click on that. You fill in the name of, whatever you want to call your topic, like help with help with shoulder shaping or help with short rows or something like that. And then you type in your question. And then you click start topic, and that will show up in the discussion threads. And I will see it and I will respond to you. Sometimes people in the group see those questions before I do, and they will offer some help as well. So sometimes that ends up being more valuable than what the help that I can give, because it might be about a type of project or a type of knitting situation that I am rarely, if ever, in, and other people have a lot of experience with it and might be able to suggest strategies for you. But if you want help, that's how you do it, is through the Ravelry group. So a couple of months ago, I was a guest on Suzanne Bryan, who's known as Knitting Suzanne. I was a guest on her Livestream channel, Off the Cuff, and we talked, I don't know, for an hour and a half. And I know a lot of you subscribe to her channel and to my channel. A couple of weeks ago, Suzanne asked me if I would like to be a return guest on her Saturday live stream, and I said yes. And she suggested that we maybe do a sort of behind the scenes type of discussion where we talk about how we go about making videos. And I don't know exactly how it's going to go. We're going to be actually talking a little bit this afternoon to talk about what's going to happen on Saturday. But the idea is that, we have certain overlapping interests and similarities and backgrounds in terms of we're both certified master hand knitters, and we both have YouTube channels, and we have a lot of viewers in common, but we don't necessarily do things exactly the same way. So how we go about, getting our ideas, or how we approach creating our videos, that kind of thing. So if you are interested in seeing that, that is going to be on Saturday, I believe Saturday is September 5th. I've lost track of the days, but at 2 p.m. Pacific time, which is 4 p.m. Central time where I am, 5 p.m. Eastern time. And if you're in Europe, it's going to be like 10, 11 o'clock at night, depending on where you are. So that's happening on Saturday, and she keeps those up on her channel. So if you missed the live stream but still want to watch it, it will be available on her channel. And I will put a link down in the video description to the live stream. And we have the link already, and you can set a reminder if you want to for that. But that will be on Saturday, tomorrow, on Suzanne's channel. A little bit of a reminder, because I had a question about this recently. This year, I am not uploading technique videos every single Tuesday. I don't have a set schedule for it. I am uploading them more often than not on Tuesdays, but if you are expecting a video on Tuesday and you don't see it, that just means I didn't do one for that week. Sometimes the ideas I have for videos aren't working out the way I wanted to, and I need to rethink them. And that just happens because it's been 3.5 years, and sometimes the ideas that I'm trying to convey might be a little more complex than just a simple, here's how to do a technique and here's why it works. It's maybe a more complex idea. So just be aware that if you don't see a video from me on some random Tuesday, it's because I just didn't do one that Tuesday. So every week I get messages or comments from people who say, oh, did you see this? Or I thought you might be interested in this. And this week I got a link from somebody. It's a link to a Facebook video interviewing the two women. I'll put their names on here because I forgot to write their names down in my notes here. They wrote a book called Saltwater Mittens that I talked about a year ago. And these are these traditional mitten patterns that you find in Newfoundland, which is in Canada. This is the third book that came out just a couple of days ago in their series. So the first one was Saltwater Mittens, and the second one was, I think, called Saltwater Classics. And this third one is called Saltwater Gifts. And these are typically smaller projects. They're not big projects. They're hats and mittens and scarves and little things like that. And so they're using traditional stitch patterns and things from that particular area. So a lot of it is stranded color work. But the reason the person sent me a link to the video and they said, well, the section you might be really interested in is at about 58 minutes into the interview. That you might be very interested in watching the whole thing, but this specific part was about a pair of World War I era socks that had been made but hadn't been worn by a soldier, because socks wouldn't have lasted. They went through so many socks during World War I, but it was a sock that somebody had knitted then, but it never got given to a soldier, and it's in a museum. And so they kind of reverse engineered it to see how it was made, and then they wrote up a pattern that's in that book. But it's kind of it's an interesting section of the video because they talk a little bit about the soldiers from Newfoundland and also the way that they differentiated socks for different sizes and that sort of thing. So if you are interested in that, I'll put a picture of the cover of this new book. I don't have it, but this is a picture of the cover, and I'll put links down to their books down in the video description, as well as the link to the interview, so down in the video description. So this year I have bought quite a few vintage and antique knitting books. Some of them have been reproduction copies of books, but a lot of them have been the original thing. And I've been showing you a few of those the past couple of weeks as I've gotten them. So I wanted to answer a couple of questions and comments that I've had, some of which have to do with the vintage and antique books, and some of them just have to do with my knitting library in general. One of the questions is, where do I buy these books? Like, how do I find them? So vintage and antique books, you can find, depending on how old they are, you can find them online in a variety of places. If there's a specific title that you're looking for, I think the best thing to do is to Google that, because you never know where it might be. It might be in Google Books. It might be on archive.org. It might be available in a physical copy on eBay or Etsy or Amazon, although I'd be very cautious about Amazon. If the price seems reasonable, Amazon can be an okay place to get something, but there can be some really weird prices on books that are old that just don't make sense. Like, we're talking thousands of dollars sometimes for a book that you can get other places for 10 or 12 bucks. It just doesn't make sense. So I'd be careful about the Amazon thing when it comes to some of these books. That could be okay. So anyway, if you have a title, I would just Google it, because you never know. It could be available in some sort of digital format, or somebody could have a physical copy, or somebody could have a digital copy that they are selling. Like, it might be a physical reproduction copy, or it might just be a downloadable PDF, but they might be charging a couple bucks for it. There's a variety of places. There's a website called Antique Pattern Library, and that has antique patterns of all, not just knitting, but could be crochet or needlepoint, could be a variety of different patterns of different sorts of needlework. And those, it's kind of an interesting website. It's a little hard to navigate, and sometimes they just have the names of a book listed and then they say who owns it, but they don't have a digitized copy of it. But other times they do have digitized copies. Archive.org is excellent. If you just search on the word knitting, you will get a lot of great hits. You don't necessarily get every knitting manual that is out there that's been digitized, and because I think it depends on how it's been tagged. And that is why, if you actually have the name of a book that you are specifically interested in, then I would put it in in that way, and you would get a hit on archive.org if you just Googled it that way. The place where I buy most of my physical copies, like I have a lot of vintage and antique books up here, the place where I normally buy those from is called Abe Books. And really what it is, it's a sort of a consortium of used and rare booksellers around the world. So they can list their books on Abe. And so I can go to Abe and I can look for a particular publisher if I'm looking for that, or a particular time frame, and with knitting as a tag, and it will find these old books, and I can look for them there. So you can get just regular old used books that way, but you can also get some of these really old vintage things. Other places where I have found things are Hatha Trust. Again, I'll put that name on the screen, but I'll put a link down below. Hatha Trust is a group of the Big Ten university libraries plus California. These are research institutions, and they have their books digitized and available to look at. So you can typically look at things on there, but you can only download a page at a time. You can't download the whole thing unless you're a member of that library. But they have a lot of periodicals too. So I've talked about the Delineator, which was a publication, a monthly women's publication, women's magazine that was published by Butterick. And really the purpose of that was to sell their sewing patterns. Butterick is the guy who invented the tissue paper sewing pattern. Then he also did knitting patterns as well. They have a number of Delineator issues on Hatha Trust, but there have been other periodicals I found recently. So a couple of weeks ago, I was showing this book right here, and I have a few others that are similar in size. These are paperback books, and she has something that is similar to this, one of these old paperback books, but the cover is missing, and so it doesn't know what the name of the book was or when it was published, and was wondering how she could figure out how old the book was. So there's a couple of ways to do that. So these kind of books were often published by a yarn company. So this is the Columbia Book of Yarns, and in the back you will see names of the yarn, or even in the front they'll advertise their yarns within the book. But also, if it's published by a yarn company, the pattern is going to tell you what kind of yarn to use, and it's going to be one of their yarns. Like right here, it says material, Columbia Spanish. This one is threefold Columbia Saxony. So if all of the patterns are calling for a yarn that's from a particular yarn company, that will tell you who published it. Then you can go onto someplace like archive.org, and you can look for knitting manuals from Columbia or something like that, and see if the patterns that are in any of those digitized books are in these. But the other thing to do is to narrow things down based on the hairstyles and the fashions. And that can be really tricky if you have never looked at old photographs or any sort of things like this, like try to figure out what time period something is. So if their hair is bobbed, that's 1920s. If their hair is not bobbed, it's before the 1920s. If the women's sweaters are fitted at the waist, like they end at the waist, there might be some that are longer, but if it's sweaters that are fitted at the waist and you see their hair is kind of bouffanty, that's probably the Edwardian era, so between 1900 and 1910. And then if the sweaters are much longer, if they're almost not fitted in a way, it might be slightly fitted but very long, or even just straight down, and they have kind of knitted belts on them, those are going to be probably 1910s into the World War I era in general. So that gives you an idea of the decade. But if you're still not sure, then what you can do is there is a Ravelry group called All Things Vintage, and you could post the pictures of some of the pages, especially near the front, that you have that might help other people say, oh, I have that book too, and it was published in such a year. So that's kind of the way you narrow things down. You have to kind of look at the hair and the style of clothing, and then you can kind of narrow things down from there, try to figure out what yarn company published it, etc. The big giant balloon type of sleeves, the Lego mutton balloon sleeves, that was an 1890s thing. They weren't, the sleeves dramatically changed in the 1900s, and the silhouette of the bodies changed as well. So I was talking last week about actually a pattern that I found in, well, this book has a pattern for it, but I also was showing, like, there's a little cutout pattern for this knitted kneecap, and there's another knitted kneecap in here. So here in this book there's also a knitted kneecap, and these two kneecaps have different kinds of construction, and I was speculating about, like, what would people have used those for, and a number of people have suggested, oh well, those would have been needed for, you know, being on your hands and knees scrubbing floors, or they suggested, you know, if you were kneeling to pray, that would be something that you would need. I'm not going to say that's not what these were for, but I'm going to suggest that it's probably not what was in mind. There were several people who mentioned that they'd actually made some of these kind of knee warmers or kneecaps recently, either for themselves or for a family member who's had knee surgery or who has arthritis and their knees really ache and feel cold, and they keep them warm. And I really think that's what the purpose of these were for. And the reason I don't think it was in order to cushion the knees for kneeling and for scrubbing floors is because these pattern books tend to be aimed at middle class and upper middle class women. The sweaters, as I've mentioned many times, were athletic garments. So these were garments that you would wear while you were golfing or playing tennis or going bicycling. In some cases, they even talk about yachting. So if you're going on a sailboat or something like that. You'll see articles in newspapers that say knitting sweaters has become a big fad, and at the seaside, everybody, you know, Harper's Bazaar would have an article about how everybody who knows how to knit was knitting sweaters. It's the latest fad when they were on their summer holidays at the seaside. These are not people who are scrubbing their own floors in most likelihood. We don't tend to think of having domestic help, like daily domestic help, as middle class people today. But up until about sometime in the Depression, if you were a middle class family, you had domestic servants. They may or may not have lived in your home. Over time, it got to be where it was a day job, and before that, though, they would have been relegated to the tiniest room or corner of the house, would have been their quarters, and they would have been in charge of, you know, cooking meals and cleaning the house, and they would also have done things like laundry. And some families may have had somebody specifically who did laundry versus somebody who did the cooking. So we're kind of in a hierarchy of these kinds of jobs. And it wasn't until appliances sort of entered the picture that middle class women started doing some of their own housework. So I don't think that, and I could be wrong, but I don't think that knitting patterns that were aimed at women of that social class were likely to have patterns for kneecaps so that the women could be on their hands and knees scrubbing floors. Women did not have a lot of job opportunities back then. And so one of the articles I was reading suggested that women either were servants or they had servants. So that's kind of what women could be. I mean, obviously there are exceptions to that, but not a lot. And again, if somebody has some other evidence to indicate otherwise, I would happily welcome that. And I did find an article that I felt would be helpful to read about, which I will include down below. So one of the things that I expected to do with this 1890s sweater, in order to understand how the sleeves and this yoke and neck all came together, what I expected to have to knit several times, this area. The first time I was going to knit it the way the instructions indicated, which I was pretty convinced was not going to work out right, that it would be far too long. And it was. So I ripped back and I adjusted the rate of decreasing, and it's much better. But part of the problem is that this is in ribbing, and it's when it's relaxed, it's sucked in this way. And I haven't washed or blocked. And so I want to wash and block it so that the fabric will relax a little bit. And then I want to try it on again and then really think about how I want to change things. I think you can see the issue here. See how long this is compared to the photograph. But I think that once this is washed, it's going to be a little bit wider. But this, it was far worse when I knit this as the pattern instructed. I'm going to cut the neck off and rip this part back again and then do it the way that I think it really should be done and in the way that I thought it should be done when I first read through the pattern. Because I'd never seen this construction before, I wanted to be sure that what I was picturing in my head was what was really happening. But I'm not 100% sure I need to rip this shoulder part out again. I'm not going to rip the whole neck back. I'm just going to cut this off right here and rip this part back and reknit this. It'll be much shorter. The decreases will happen much sooner, and so this part will be much shorter, and then I'll just graft it back on. It was a lot of knitting, and I was a little bit sick of it, so I'll probably take the weekend off from it and do something else. I have some ideas about what I'm going to do this weekend. It has to do with my office and the room next door. I knit some socks for my daughter who's living in the Netherlands and her boyfriend. I knit them earlier this summer, and they've been sitting here waiting to have the ends woven in to be washed, and then I would send them off. I wasn't in a hurry to send them off because it was hot in the middle of the summer. I had asked her, do you wear wool socks in the summer in the Netherlands or not? She said no, but she called me last week and she said, can you take me into my bedroom? And she meant, can I take the computer in? And this is her bedroom on the other side of this wall. It wasn't her bedroom when she lived at home. She had a much bigger bedroom. That one was her younger sister's bedroom. So when Nina went to college, Sophia got Nina's room. And so this became Nina's room. We repainted it for her, got her a new bed in there. And but it's not the room she grew up in. And she's, home not at all right now. So I use that room as a place I have my spinning wheel in there. I have a table set up with a drum carder. And sometimes when I'm showing you things on a dress form right here, when I'm done with it, I just stick it in there. So I took the computer in there and showed her closet. And she said, can you send me these clothes, these clothes, these clothes, these clothes? She's about ready to start a certification process at this academy. And she's like, it's the beginning of the school year. I feel like I want some new clothes. So she wanted some of these clothes. I'm like, sure. So yesterday I finally thought, okay, I'm going to find a box and get it all set up for her. I could not find the socks that I knit for her. They weren't where I thought that I would have put them, with some other socks that I knit that I have to mail out to my mom and my brother. Like, where are they? So I was taking my entire office apart. My desk was a mess, and I was lifting everything up. I was putting balls of yarn away. I was putting books away. I could not find them anywhere. I looked everywhere, and I thought, well, maybe I took them into that room to keep them with the clothes. I went in that room. I'm looking everywhere. I'm looking on the bed. I'm looking, in the closet. I'm looking, taking every piece of clothing, shaking it. Where could they be? Where could they be? Could not find them. So this morning I decided to go through my office again, really methodically. I was going through every bin, every shelf. I was looking to see if I'd put them on top of books and they had fallen behind. And I thought, I'm just going to look in that room one more time. So I walked in, I turned the light on. And instead of doing what I normally do, which is like have this total focus of what it is I want to do and where I want to go, instead of going in and walking around the dress form that was in the way to get to the closet, I turned the light on and I looked at the dress form, and there sitting on the shoulder were the two pairs of socks. While I was doing all this searching, I realized it's time for another reorganization. Someone asked me a while ago about how I organize my knitting books, and I used to have a pretty clear-cut way of doing that, but I've purchased enough books, and in particular, I've been buying so many vintage books, I am out of shelf space. And so I need to kind of reorganize things and figure out how I'm going to do that. And I think that's how I'm going to spend this week. And this is a holiday weekend here in the United States. It's Labor Day weekend. So Monday is the actual holiday. This is also the state fair season. Normally this would be the time of year I'd be going to the state fair a couple of times, which was canceled this year, which is very sad. The past couple of years I've gone through, we have the largest knitting competition in any state fair. I'm pretty confident that's true. I actually tried to methodically find every knitting competition in every state fair that I thought was a significant size. And we have, first of all, one of the largest, if not the largest state fair in the country. Plus, we are in the north, and a lot of people are descended from Northern Europeans who had a strong knitting tradition when they moved here. And we have a lot of knitters here. So the past couple of years, I've gone through the creative activities building, and I've filmed the various knitted items. So I will link to, now that you guys know where the links are, link to those state fair videos up here if you are interested in looking at those. Because I really miss that this time of year. It feels weird that it's September without having been to the state fair a couple of times. And this would have been the final weekend of the state fair. The last day would have been this Monday. So that's kind of a sad hole in the year for me. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.